In this tutorial video, we're going to go through how to get your project ready for toolpathing in EasyCarve. So in this tutorial video, we're going to use this layout that we have already created. If you'd like further information on how to set up a layout, I would recommend watching the how to use backgrounds, how to use text regions, and how to use model regions tutorial videos. After creating your layout, you will want to go through setting the size and position of the project. So to do this, we can either click on the size and position option here, or click the next option down here, and we can see that it takes us to the next set of settings in EasyCarve. As we can see here, for the size and position, we have three different sections: the model section, the material section, and the material origin section. First, I'm going to go through the model section here. So the first option at the top is to set the project units, which you can select millimeters or inches. What you select here will be used in the other two sections, but can also be changed in the other two sections if you decide later on you want to use a different unit. For this project, I am going to select the inches option here. The next option is the size. Please note this is the size of the project we have created, not the size of the material you are using. So you can see here that we are able to set the size for the width of the project, the height of the project, and the depth of the project. To change this, you would just need to click the option you want to edit and then enter the new value into this box. The width and height of the model are always linked, so if you change one of them, the other will proportionally change to the correct value as well. You can see here though, for the depth, we do have the option to turn this off so it's not linked with the width and height of the model, so this can be changed independently. So if you were to unselect this, it would only edit the depth of the model and not update the other two values as well. So for example, if I wanted to change the depth of the project to 0.4 inches instead, I have just updated this and you can see that the width and height have stayed the same. Now say that I want to change this and I do want the depth of the project to be linked with the height and width of the model. I can then reselect this and press the reset option here. So it will reset it so it is linked and proportional to the width and height that we have set. Now as you can see, we do have this warning here, which means that the current depth of the model is larger than the thickness of the material we have set. But we can leave this for now, as we are going to edit the material in the next section. The other two options that we have available for the model is we can rotate the model in this section, and this will rotate the model 90 degrees each time. And we can also mirror the project. So now we're going to look at the next section, which is the material properties, which again, we can select either this option here or go to the bottom here and click next to get to. So again, you can see the first option we have is the project units, and we have already set this up in the previous section, so it is in inches. Now if we were to change this to millimeters, it would update the project here, and if we went back to the model section, you can see that this now says millimeters instead and uses millimeters. So if I go back to inches, again, it will update the project, and if we go back into the material section, you can see this has gone back to inches as well. Then the next option is the material. Now you will want to make sure you've got the correct material selected, as this will affect the tool settings that are used when creating the toolpaths. If you have not set up the correct material for your project and need more information on how to do this and setting up tools for this material setting, I would recommend watching the How to Set Up Your Machine, Materials and Tool Database tutorial video for EasyCarve. So the next section we can see here is the thickness. This will be the thickness of your material, and you will need to enter an accurate thickness for the material you are using into this section. Now, as you can see, as mentioned in the previous section, we are seeing this warning here that will let us know that our current material thickness is thinner than the model depth that we have selected in the previous section. So we'd either need to go back to the model section to make the model thinner, or we would need to use thicker material. But for this example, I'm using a material with the thickness of 0.75 inches. So you can see that this is thicker than the model depth we have selected, so we no longer see this error here. Now the next option is the model position in material. So this is where the model will sit in the material we are cutting. So if this is to the top of the material, this means the very top of the project we have created will sit right at the top of the material. If we move this to the bottom of the material, this means that the bottom of our project will sit at the bottom of the material, and it will cut away the excess material along the top. Or you can also set it to sit in the middle of the material as well, which will cut away this amount of the material above the model and leave this amount of material at the bottom of the model. Where you want to place the model in the material will depend on the project you are cutting. For example, if you are cutting more of a dish-shaped model, then you may want to cut this on the top of the material you are using. If you are cutting a project like the example here, you may want to leave a bit of a gap above the top of the material to allow for any inconsistencies in the material thickness, to make sure you get a nice clean cut along the top of the project. So for this project, I am going to set the project to sit at the bottom of the material. So the next section we're going to look at is the material origin. And again, we can select this option here, or we can click the next option down here to go to this section. So as we can see, the first option, like for the other sections, is the project units. So the next two options in this section are the XY origin and Z origin. These will need to match where you are setting these settings on your machine. So with the XY origin, you'll need to select where you are setting the X0, Y0 position on your machine compared to the project you are creating. So if you are setting it to the lower left corner, you can select this option. If you are setting the X0, Y0 position to the center of the project, you can change this and select this option here. But for this example, I will be setting it in the lower left corner on the machine, so I will need to select this option here. And again, the Z origin will depend on where you are setting the Z0 on your machine, whether you will be setting this to the material surface or the spoil board of your machine. Now we're going to look at the next option, which is the offset option. This will allow you to offset the project by a set distance from the X0, Y0 origin that you have set up here. So for example, if you are setting the X0, Y0 position to the lower left of the material you are using, but you want the model to cut into a specific place in the material, or you want to avoid damage on the material you are using, then you may want to offset the toolpaths a set distance here to avoid these areas or to cut into a specific part of the material you are using from the X0, Y0 position. But for this example, I'm not going to add an offset to this project. A few things you will need to consider when setting the size and position of your project is that your material is large enough to cut your project out with the size that you have set it. You'll also need to consider how you are holding down the material onto the machine for the size and position of the project you are cutting out. Also, when setting the XY origin, you will also need to consider that depending on the tool paths you are going to create, the tool may cut past the XY origin. So again, you will need to consider this when setting up the material on the machine. I hope you have found this tutorial video helpful, where we have gone through the different settings you will need to go through to get your project ready for toolpathing in EasyCarve.